how the algorithms work, how these models have been trained, on which data these models have been trained. I think we cannot afford that, especially seeing the enormous increase of research being or making use of these models. If we're not going to work on that transparency issue, I think we run the risk of ending up in an even bigger reproducibility crisis than we have already seen in the past few years. Another worry, concern, I would say, are the huge investments needed for AI. We have seen the announcement of huge investments in the past few weeks in America, but also in Europe. And I think, it's clear that academia will never be able to bring together these kinds of funding streams with the risk that academia will become dependent on these commercial entities. So that's really something we have to be looking into, I think. And then there's also very practical issues, of course, already. There was this outcry a few weeks ago already when we saw that the commercial publishers in the meantime make millions of dollars in selling their content to all these AI companies and startup firms by selling the research content that basically is produced by the research community to these companies. Very often without asking the research community whether they would like that their material is being used to train AI models. Question whether there are or will be possibilities to opt out of these schemes. And if they are being developed, I think that's going far too slowly at the moment, actually. Whether commercial companies like OpenAI will actually respect those opt-outs if they are in place, given the fact that we already know that these companies currently make use of material that they acquired illegally. And so using copyrighted material, basically. Europe is the first region where we now have some kind of regulation with the AI Act that has come into place that also looks at those transparency issues with training models, etc. But I do think more engagement from the open science community in these kinds of discussions will become important and are highly needed in the coming years, coming time. I'm coming to the end of my talk, but not without pointing to a debate which is taking place within the open science community, which I think will become important in the coming years also. And I think this topic is a little bit different, is of a little bit different order than the issues that I have been mentioning before, but are still important and will become more important in the coming years. So I think we can all agree that quite some progress has been made within open science, that it is slowly becoming mainstream, that policies are in place, but it is also important to stay critical about how open science is actually implemented. And I want to give two examples of scholars that have, I think, useful and important insight in these discussions. And the first one is Tony Ross Hellauer. He's working at the Open and Reproducible Research Group at Graz University in Austria. And he has led an important European project called the Merit Project, in which he has studied the implementation of open science in Europe and globally. And what he is arguing is that very often open science is implemented with the very best intentions, but open science also can go wrong. And one of the biggest points he is making that, of course, the open science movement also wants to close the gap, that inequality gap in the science system. But actually, there are all kinds of specific open science implementations that actually make that gap much bigger. And so we know, of course, the example of the APC model of open access, the paying for publications, the rising number of transformative agreements in the world that actually lead to the situation that, rich institutions, researchers in rich countries at rich institutions can publish open access, but researchers in less well-funded parts of the world can read the growing open access literature, but are deprived of possibilities to publish open access. And that's just one example. He has much more examples of how specific implementations of open access, open science broadly, actually runs the risk of making this inequity that we want to make smaller, of course, that will increase only. So I think an important debate to be held also here in the Netherlands. My last point, last example, another, I think, important researcher in this area. I understood from Jeroen that she actually did her PhD at VU University. Sabina Leonelli, very inspiring philosopher, I think. And a lot of her work is really about a point that was also made by René in his contribution, and that is about the epistemic diversity and the risk that we run when implementing open science, that we do not have enough attention of the enormous epistemic diversity that exists in the science system. This paper, she presents all kinds of examples of open practices like data sharing, or open research software, or even a practice like reproducibility, really has different meanings in different contexts and in different disciplines, and that an overly standardized conceptualization of open science really is not helpful, and we should be much more have much more attention for the diversity within the research system. I think an important insight that also really needs more discussion within our community going forward. I'm going to wrap up. I'm not going to draw any hard conclusions from my presentation. It consisted of 3 parts, as you have seen. So in the first, I hope I have been able to show you how broad the church is of open science, and that it is not a problem at all, but it's nice to be aware of the enormous diversity that's around in our community. I hope I have shown you a little bit about what we are doing at the Open Science NL program in the Netherlands to foster the transition to open science in the Netherlands. And I have touched upon a few trends and developments that I see in this field, some of which I think need the attention of us as a community. Some are the result of very concerning, mostly political developments that, for the moment, I think we can observe and keep hoping for better times. Thank you very much.